He Who Remains terrified me.
Higher, further, faster.
And I got some thoughts about that. Spoiler warnings if you haven't seen Loki yet. For everybody else, let's go. Okay, so watching Loki was beautiful, and with season 1 wrapped up, the roller coaster of twists, turns, laughter, tears, and Nexus events are over, leaving the fandom to prune their way through theory after theory. I'm sorry for that pun, but I don't want to do that. No, like always, I have some thoughts on a very particular moment, easily overlooked when you consider all the bombs dropped by Jonathan Majors as the villain. I mean the hero. No, that's not. I loved Jonathan Majors. The quirky, whacked out Willy Wonka-ness of his performance was fan-freaking-tastic. But like I said, there's one moment that stood out to me. This moment.
Buddy, I'm tired. And I'm older. I'm older than I look.
Okay, so you're probably asking, but why? That was nothing. And I couldn't disagree with you more. To me, this moment is the moment, and it's horrifying to me. It's the linchpin in our truly understanding what happens going forward. It answers a lot of questions that surfaced watching the episode. Chief among them, was he playing Loki and Sylvie the whole time? Did they really even have a choice? If so, why all the deception? Why not just grab the two of them way earlier, in quotes, bring them to the end of time citadel, and then just explain that he needed one of them to kill him?
Stop.
Okay, yeah, we're going to get into all that. But first, let's get into the right mindset by discussing a brief history of the two characters Marvel blended together in order to debut our upcoming MCU big bad. He Who Remains. That's who Jonathan Majors' character is named after, of course, and Immortus. According to Marvel, He Who Remains is the final director of the Time Variance Authority at the Citadel at the end of time, the last reality of the multiverse. It goes on to explain how He Who Remains created the Timekeepers, a triad of beings who become the masters of Immortus, who we'll discuss next, as well as the custodians of all time, using the vast power amassed by the Time Variance Authority during its unmeasurably long existence. Now, of course, the Timekeepers were revealed in the show to be lifeless robots with a speech impediment, but in the comic universe, they're fated to survive to the end of eternity, which is known as the Cataclysm. Now, their survival will lead them to teaching their counterparts in the next universal cycle how to avoid the mistakes of their dying universe. In addition, their final service to existence is to become living batteries of chronal power, all the accumulated energy of the TVA's eternity of existence. Wow. So here we see the elements of lore the Loki series uses, but there are clearly pieces missing to Jonathan's performance. Enter Immortus. Now, how better to learn the essence of this character than to hear it from the man himself, or more specifically, from a version of the man himself comic book fans are all too familiar with. He calls himself the Master of Time. Gardener of Time is more truthful. He prunes away the chronal branches deemed by others to be dangerous, reducing reality to a bloodless meadow. But that's not the way of warriors, of men. I say, let it be a forest, let it be a jungle. Kang the Conqueror. Damn. Now you know you're bad when you have to roast yourself. Now, Immortus, born Nathaniel Richards, was born in the 30th century of Earth 6311, a reality where humanity never went into the Dark Ages. After centuries of advancement and warfare, peace was brought to the land by a time traveler from Earth 616, also named Nathaniel Richards. Earth 616 is the main timeline of the Marvel Comics universe, all right? Now, as an adult, Nathaniel discovered a time machine, and having grown bored of his peaceful time, traveled back to ancient Egypt on Earth 616. There, he set himself up as Pharaoh Rama-Tut until he was ousted from this position by the Fantastic Four. Rama-Tut tried to flee back to his own era, but he was caught in a time storm and was forced to appear in present-day Earth 616, leading to a chance encounter with, get this, his possible ancestor, Dr. Doom. Inspired by Doom, Nathaniel abandoned his Rama-Tut persona and assumed many identities until he eventually became Kang the Conqueror. Now, after achieving so many conquests over so many galaxies and so many time periods, he became less and less involved with the battles themselves, which he loved, coming to view himself as nothing but a bureaucrat and administrator. Deciding to return to a more simpler time, Kang turned his vast empire over to his lover Ravonna. Yeah, Ravonna, and returned to ancient Egypt, resuming his guise as Rama-Tut, where he eventually, this time, became a Mortis and helped the Avengers defeat his past, future Kang self. Okay, basic backstory done. The whole mythos surrounding Nathaniel Richards and his more famous iterations runs much, much deeper though, so I suggest you go check it out. But we're talking about this.
Tired.
Now, why did I walk through the comic book histories of these two characters before explaining this barely noticeable moment? Time. It's all about time. Okay, so he who remains, is old. More importantly, he's older than he looks. He states this flat out. And that got me thinking, how old is he? Now, it's probable that we'll never get a specific answer. Hell, the character himself probably doesn't know at this point. So let me edit that question just a bit. How old could he possibly be? Now, we're going to mix universes a bit, the MCU and comics, but remember, this is just to get the brain juices flowing. It's shown outright in the show that the TVA can travel to every moment of the timeline. They've done it for eons. Think Mobius and Renslayer's, in quotes, friendship. Anywho, the question of his age, while fun to chase, really began to crumble for me as another thought began to settle in its place. What does living forever do to a person? I mean, really think about that. I'm not sure people have. He who remains, he states he's from the 31st century, 1,000 years in our future. 1,000 years in our past, the Holy Roman Empire was what's happening. Imagine traveling there and living 100 years, a lifetime. But because you can jump outside of time, you don't age. Everyone else does. Everything else does. Every meaningful relationship does, but not you. So at the end of that century, you choose a different path, take a different life, a new persona, and then you do it again and again and again, all the way up until our present, and then you keep going. You hit the 31st century, and then you pass beyond it, all the way to the end of time. Century after century, flowing with time while not actually a part of it. You're exempt. Now, imagine rewinding that clock and doing it all again, changing your roles though. And then imagine doing that again and again. Experience the whole timeline until you've experienced everything a human being can experience, and you've done it all 1,000,000 times. Okay, I think you get it. Of course, the reality is, I'm sure, much less linear than what I was describing, but I needed a framework on the amount of time we're really talking here. See, I think he who remains realized he's trapped in a time loop, but because he's human, he's held on to life, preserving himself at all costs, despite his claims of grand, benevolent missions. The catch: being outside the time stream, it allows him to maintain his physical age and visit any and all moments as many times as he wants to with no constraints, except for one. He must experience those moments first. He has to physically live them out. Imagine how many lifetimes he had to endure just to build the TVA. Think of the TVA headquarters. It doesn't matter what business you start, getting off the ground is work. That city is work to the 9th degree, the nth degree, okay? Maybe in the future we can build wonders like that, but it's not like he put those future buildings on his back and walked them outside time. It had to be made. There had to be a first variant. I mean, how else do you set up a bureaucracy? What I'm saying is, he still had to experience that time, even though he wasn't affected by it. Imagine that. Experiencing everything a human can, rewinding the clock on everything but the newness. You never get to experience a first time for anything ever again. Imagine how many lifetimes ago he who remains stopped being surprised, scared, sad, happy. 100 lives? 1,000,000 lives ago? How do you truly feel anything at all when you know everything that will happen? Are you really living, or are you just alive at that point? That's horrifying to me. The amount of memories this man possesses that have mutated into an unimaginable sea of bitterness and loneliness and regret. But that's just it. That's the setup for the finale, for his motivation. He who remains has rewound the clock, fast-forwarded the clock, twisted it, squeezed it, pruned it 100 million times using his vast wealth of accumulated knowledge, also that Sylvie could kill him. Now, I'm sure Loki's growth and his unspoken position as a universal agent of change will steer the MCU and its new multiverse onto a path that will eventually reincarnate He Who Remains, minus the infinite memories. But first, he needed Sylvie's steel will and blade to end him, because that was the only first left for him to experience. Imagine how long he thought about the truth of that statement. Think of how much it had to have consumed him. Imagine realizing that only in death could you find life again. Wow. Like I said, that terrifies me. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Also, drop a like and subscribe if you dig the content. And if you happen to be a sci-fi, fantasy, or comic book author or creator, check out NTLT book covers. We specialize in these genres, so we'll set you up with a cover that'll absolutely rock your fans' world. Go to ntltpresents.com today, okay? Badass book covers for sci-fi and fantasy authors. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.